The New Era, Chapter 32. Subject, Overdrawn S65L894T131. Subject unknown. Species description, humanoid. Ship, Grand Vessel of the Universal Omni-Union. Location, Grand Shipyard of the Universal Omni-Union.
They're through the door.
The shout was punctuated by a grand thud as a reinforced security door hit the ground. Open fire, I commanded. A few of my drones fell from the security platform's laser fire as we began to return fire with the alien weapons. Then the robots began to topple over, one by one, and I felt a surge of shameful excitement that I quickly tempered. I just lost people, and the robots aren't even the real threat here. A grenade sailed through the air towards the security forces. My father, a silent supporter of the previous rebellion, had carefully taught me how to make improvised explosive devices. But the little balls of steel that the aliens had given was something else entirely. The ball hit the ground, and one dull thud later, several pieces of machinery flew through the air. "Save the grenades!" I ordered.
Yes, Overdrone.
I'd managed to convince quite a few of my drones to join me in this potential suicide mission. Some of them had already been part of the resistance movement, but others were simply tired of the way things were. More than half of my underlings had refused, though, and were currently locked away in a storage depot. "More coming! Don't let them through the corridor!" The door that the robots had cut through led to a small corridor that exited into a room we were defending. As long as we could keep them bunched up in the corridor, their numbers wouldn't be able to overwhelm us. It all came down to ammunition, though, and I'd already had Nizzy calling for reinforcements. My own weapon stopped firing, and I took a moment to eject the magazine and insert a new one. I had to search for the button to send the bolt forward, but it wasn't long before I had it firing again. It was a remarkably simple and funny design. Technically speaking, we were throwing rocks at the most powerful military force to ever exist. And it was working. "Reinforcements are on the way," Nizzy said, twisting one of the dials in the device we'd been given. "Ammo, too." "Good," I said, taking cover and a breather. "We've got enough ammunition to last us a while, but not indefinitely." Nizzy stood up from the device and took my place in the firing line. His rifle shouted and sent a small lumps of malleable metal tearing through the air towards the enemy. Additional pieces of metal leapt from the weapon and tinkled as they hit the floor. The gunfire itself was harsh and loud, but the pretty little chiming noise afterwards always made it worth it. "Maybe I'll get the chance to see some aliens," Nizzy said as he reloaded. "I hear they're encased in armor, though." "Indeed, under the armor they're quite cosmetically appealing," I replied with a chuckle. "Not enough eyes, though." "What you mean? They only have two." "No. I mean, why do you know that? You remember those mysterious explosions? They snatched me up during that." "Snatched you up? Why?" "They needed me to put them in touch with the leadership," I said, standing up and firing at the robots. "They've probably been planning this assault for hundreds of cycles, maybe even thousands, because they managed to spot my allegiance to the rebellion even while the judicials were blind to it." "Well, stealing people doesn't exactly bode well," as he growled, "but so long as we're able to topple the wall of incompetence, I'll gratefully take their help." The main reason that so many drones sided with us is that the media decided that NASA was responsible for the anti-grav incident. His name had been added to the wall of incompetence shortly after my abduction. Their intent was to put us in our place, destroy our morale and self-esteem, then get us back to working ourselves to death. Instead, it lit a fire in many of us, even without alien intervention, and revolution was inevitable. "Wait, hold on," Nizzy took a knee. "Do you think they caused those explosions so that they could grab you?" "It's hard to call it a coincidence," I laughed. "They grabbed me the moment you left." "Then, well, do you think they might have done the same with NASA?" "I don't know," I said. "It's possible, but I don't get your hopes up." "Well, if they did grab him, they'll still have him, right? Why return you but keep him?" "I don't know." Nizzy stared at me suspiciously for a moment before returning his attention to the enemy. There were many possible explanations running through my mind, but voicing them would be a mistake. It's possible those same scenarios could occur to Nizzy as well, but if they aren't voiced, then he can simply ignore the possibilities as a manifestation of paranoia. I, however, knew little but more than he did about clandestine activities. First possibility is, of course, that NASA and 40 actually died due to the anti-grav explosion. That feels unlikely, though, because of how odd the explosion was. The next possibility is that the aliens grabbed them just like they grabbed me and interrogated them, using the anti-grav generator as cover for their disappearance. If that's the case, they wouldn't be able to return the drones without raising suspicions, which means that NASA and 40 were probably still aboard one of their ships. Another possibility is that the generator was sabotaged by the aliens and the drones were collateral damage, or they captured and killed them. I shook my head and returned to shooting the robots. "Sure I'll load them," Lizzie casually remarked as he reloaded his rifle again. "Indeed," I said. "There's a mind-boggling number of them beyond that corridor. We must keep them there, or they'll easily overrun us." "Well, I'm sure you've probably already thought of this, Overdrone, but—" Lizzie nervously rubbed his neck. "What if we collapse the door frames?" It was my turn to stare at Nizzy, but with a dumbfounded expression instead of suspicion. His idea genuinely hadn't occurred to me. "Is it load-bearing?" I asked. "Even if it isn't, it'll inconvenience their movement." I closed all but my right eye and used the scope of the alien weapon to get a closer look at the security forces. The robots were dragging and shoving their fallen counterparts out of the way, and in the distance I saw one of the towering mechs waiting its turn to get at us. I pulled up my readout to see if there was any information on the frame, but found that I was locked out. So the mines know that I'm part of the rebellion, or they've locked everyone out of their readouts. I did some quick calculations based on our location, just to make sure that we wouldn't be opening ourselves up to a vacuum. "What would it take to drop it?" I asked. Good question," Nizzy replied. It shouldn't take much if it's load-bearing. I think one of those missile launcher things would do it. But it'll have to be a clean hit. If it isn't load-bearing, we'll have to push forward and rig something up. Pushing forward would be suicide. I shook my head. "Who's our best shot?" "I'll give it a try." Before I could argue, Lizzie took a deep breath and sprinted away from our cover. I shot at the robots to try to distract them, but lasers still scorched the floor by his feet as he moved to our weapons cache. Once he made it, I dropped back down and watched him open up one of the cases that the aliens had given us.
Meg!
I turned my attention back to the door and froze. One of the massive mechs had decided that it was tired of waiting. It pushed through the door, bullets bouncing harmlessly off its thick plate armor. Its Yasini, oddly shaped and mechanical feet, crushed the robots, both active and otherwise. That got it in its way. The laser array began firing, and the sight of several drones igniting caused me to instinctively drop behind my cover. Then an ominous hum began tickling the air, causing the skin in the back of my knees to crawl. The plasma weapon. We were doomed. No, we aren't done yet. Thanks to the aliens, we have our weaponry to deal with this. I reached for one of my grenades, pulled the little metal ring, and tossed it into the mech's direction. A dull thud sounded, but the humming sound continued. "Take it down!" I shouted. A hissing whistle disrupted the hum, and I looked up to see Nizzy holding a smoking tube. A moment later, the floor shook and a wave of blistering heat washed over us. Nizzy screamed, dropping to the ground and rolling to extinguish himself. Without thinking, I rushed over to Nizzy and dragged him behind the cover he was nearest to. Myself and a couple other drones frantically patted him to extinguish the flames. A quick check over the barricade confirmed that Nizzy had struck the mech's plasma battery. "Did it work?" he asked, a touch of delirium in his voice. "Mech down," I replied. "What about the door?" I checked again, and sighed in disappointment. "Mech was too far away from the frame," I said. "But there's some slag in the corridor, at least." "Oh, good, slag will slow them down a little," Lizzie said, and coughed and winced in pain. "Overdrone, am I going to make it?" I glanced over his extensive burns. Blisters covered his face and neck. The flesh had completely peeled away from these implants, but the metal hadn't melted. "No, of course you're going to make it," one of the other drones interjected. "All of your implants are intact. It's just burns. We'll have you back in the fight in no time." "I can't see, though." "That might be temporary," I said. "Flesh blindness. Even if it's not, we'll get you some prosthetic ones once we get the chance." There was silence for a moment, with the exception of bullets and lasers exchanging sides. "What are we going to do about the door?" Nizzy asked, his eyes looking in my general direction. "Give me one of those tubes," I said. "I'll give it a shot." Wordlessly, one of the drones ran over to one of the crates and pulled out one of the tubes. He checked it over, then grabbed the spike-shaped object and inserted it into the tube. The next thing I knew, the rocket launcher was in my hands. "Anything I should know about this thing?" I asked. "It's just like the rifles," Nizzy said. "The hiss is loud, but if you don't wince, you'll strike true." He took a breath to say more, but fell silent and still. I worriedly checked his vitals and breathed a sigh of relief at the discovery that he'd merely lost consciousness. Then I steeled myself and rose with the tube ready. The scope was similar to a rifle, as was the trigger mechanism. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, double-checking my aim. As I depressed the trigger, a laser hit me in the left bicep and caused me to wince. I dropped back into cover as the rocket traveled through the air. "Take it all," I swore. "Get me another." I was interrupted by a deep rumble followed by cheering. Holding my injured arm, I peeked above the cover and gasped. The entire corridor had collapsed. Somehow, I'd done it. The rocket had travelled true despite my injury. The remainder of the security robots were quickly dealt with, and we began the process of recovery. Nizzy and the rest of the injured were carried to an area where they could be treated. Our dead were somberly covered and loaded into a cart. They would be incinerated once we got the chance.
Overdrone, our reinforcements are here.
A drone reported. I continued to stare at the dead for a few moments, then nodded and turned to greet our reinforcements. Tall, armored aliens stood in front of me. Despite their expressionless helmets, I could tell that they were confused. "You must be the Overdrone," one of the aliens said. "I'm Lieutenant Oscar. We were sent to reinforce this precision, but—" "The door frame was load-bearing," I explained. "We destroyed it and collapsed the corridor. It'll take quite some while for security to clear it and renew their assault. Sorry to waste your time, but the fight's over for now." "I see," Oscar said. "Well, we're looking forward to the fight, but I guess we can content ourselves with getting dug in. Nothing more satisfying than a well-laid kill zone." I nodded, feeling an odd sort of malaise begin to take me. Exhaustion, depression. We had won this fight, but we'd lost quite a few. Even Nizzy was too injured to continue. There were many more fights to come as well. Part of me believed, even for the briefest of moments, that this would be quick. I watched the lieutenant and his men begin to set up. Guns came out of crates and were positioned with a line of sight on the collapsed corridor. Ammunition was distributed in a pattern that didn't make any sense to me. Soldiers took their posts and began to chat amongst themselves, always as one of them having full view of the corridor. They moved much more efficiently than my drones, as if they'd been doing this their entire life. How had they become good at fighting? Had they been fighting the Omni-Union for multiple generations, or are they like us, but with war instead of construction? Who else could they have fought if not the Omni-Union, though? I wanted to ask the aliens about NASA, but their origins and their capabilities and even their lives, but I was too tired to muster up courage to speak to them. Instead, I found a portable charging bay and plugged in, closing my eyes to rest.
Overdrone S655L894T131?
Someone asked a moment later. I opened my eyes and stared at the source of the question in disbelief. 2 drones were standing before me, a male and a female. I unplugged from my charging bay and stood, fighting the sudden urge to hug them. "NASA, 40, I asked. "Is it truly you?" "Yes," NASA smiled. "We were detained as prisoners aboard the alien vessel, or one of them, rather. I thought as much, but didn't dare hope. Why are you here?"
An alien by the name of Captain Reynolds offered us the chance to join you.
40 said.
I couldn't say no.
NASA rested a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, you could have. But you made the right choice," he said, then turned back to me. "Part of the agreement for our release is that we do not accept command roles and are required to be supervised. Is Nizzy with you?" "I'll supervise you," I said. "Nizzy has been injured, but is still alive. I'll take you to him." I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.